The ancient cathedral's stone walls echoed with the sound of Marcus Blackwood's boots. As he approached the ornate throne, gargoyles leered down from shadowed alcoves, their carved eyes seeming to track his movement through the vampiric court. The scent of old blood and decay hung heavy in the air, a reminder of centuries of feeding that had taken place within these unhallowed halls. Lord Blackthorn reclined upon his obsidian throne, his pale fingers drumming against the armrest with predatory patience. The vampire lord's crimson eyes gleamed with barely contained amusement as he studied the hunter who had dared enter his domain. Marcus had earned his reputation through 3 decades of vampire hunting, his silver-blessed weapons and extensive knowledge of the undead making him both feared and respected in supernatural circles. Marcus Blackwood, Lord Blackthorn's voice carried the weight of centuries. Silk wrapped around steel, the legendary hunter graces my court. How deliciously ironic. Marcus kept his hand near his silver-lined coat, ready to draw the blessed stake hidden within. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, even during a contracted arrangement. Our business is concluded, Blackthorn. Your rival covens have been eliminated as requested. Now pay what you owe. The vampire lord's laughter echoed through the cathedral, like breaking glass. Oh, but my dear hunter, I have something far more valuable than mere gold to offer you. He gestured toward a shadowed alcove where the lesser vampires emerged, carrying between them what appeared to be an unconscious woman. Marcus tensed, recognizing the trap-like quality of the moment. The woman they carried was ethereally beautiful, with raven black hair that cascaded over pale shoulders. Her skin held the telltale luminescence of vampire heritage, but something seemed wrong. She appeared fragile, almost mortal in her vulnerability. Behold my greatest disappointment, Lord Blackthorn announced with theatrical flair. Seraphina Nightfall, my heir and the source of centuries of embarrassment, born of my blood yet cursed with weakness that would shame a fledgling. The vampires deposited the unconscious woman onto the stone floor with callous disregard. Marcus noticed the way her breath came in shallow gasps, distinctly human despite her supernatural heritage. Dark veins traced beneath her translucent skin, suggesting some form of poisoning or curse. She feeds like a mortal, Blackthorn continued, his tone dripping with disgust. Sunlight weakens her rather than burning. She possesses no supernatural strength, and her attempts at transformation are laughably pathetic. For 3 centuries, I've searched for some use for this abomination, but she remains utterly worthless. Marcus studied the woman more carefully, noting the way her fingers twitched as if fighting against invisible bonds. Even unconscious, there was something about her that seemed to call to him. Perhaps it was the hunter's instinct to protect the innocent, or maybe something deeper that he couldn't yet identify. What exactly are you proposing? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Consider her a bonus payment. The vampire lord's smile revealed elongated fangs. Take this burden off my hands. Sell her to other hunters for sport. Use her as bait for stronger vampires, or simply end her miserable existence. I care not, so long as she is no longer my responsibility. The casual cruelty in Blackthorn's voice made Marcus's jaw clench. He'd killed countless vampires over the years, but this felt different. The woman, Seraphina, wasn't a threat. She was a victim, discarded by her own creator for failing to meet his impossible standards. She's not payment, Marcus said flatly. She's a person. Blackthorn's laughter turned genuinely amused. My dear hunter, you've spent so long killing my kind that you've forgotten the fundamental truth. We are predators, not people. This creature is neither human nor properly vampire. She exists in a liminal space that makes her useful to no one. As if responding to her father's words, Seraphina's eyes fluttered open. They were the deepest blue Marcus had ever seen, like midnight sky touched with starlight. When her gaze met his, he felt something electric pass between them, recognition, perhaps, or destiny finally clicking into place. Please, she whispered, her voice carrying a musical quality that seemed to resonate in his chest. Don't leave me here. Lord Blackthorn's expression darkened at her presumption. You see, she lacks even the pride necessary for our kind, begging a hunter for salvation. Pathetic beyond measure. Marcus found himself kneeling beside Seraphina, his protective instincts overriding years of training. When he helped her sit up, their skin made contact, and he could have sworn he felt power spark between them. She was warm, unlike any vampire he'd encountered, and there was something in her eyes that spoke of hidden depths. "Can you stand?" he asked gently, ignoring Blackthorn's look of disgust. Serafina nodded, accepting his offered hand. The moment she stood, Marcus noticed how she seemed to gain strength from their contact. Color returned to her pale cheeks, and the dark veins beneath her skin began to fade. "Interesting," Blackthorn mused, his crimson eyes narrowing with sudden attention. "She responds to you, Hunter. Perhaps this arrangement will prove more entertaining than I anticipated." Marcus helped Serafina toward the cathedral's exit, noting how she stayed close to his side. Whatever power flowed between them seemed to stabilize her condition, making her appear more vital with each step they took together. "This isn't over, Blackthorn," Marcus called back to the vampire lord. "Your debts don't disappear because you've added insult to underpayment." "Oh, but they do," the ancient vampire replied with satisfied malice. "You accepted my offer when you took possession of the girl. Consider your compensation complete. Unless you'd prefer I reclaim my property and compensate you with death instead." As they emerged into the night air, Serafina took her first free breath in what felt like centuries. Marcus could feel the way she trembled against his side, whether from fear, weakness, or anticipation. He couldn't tell. "Thank you," she said softly, her blue eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart race. "You don't know what you've done for me." Marcus looked down at the vampire heir who had been given to him as a cruel joke, sensing that his life had just taken a turn toward something extraordinary. "I have a feeling we're both about to find out." The moon hung low in the sky as they walked away from Lord Blackthorn's domain. Two unlikely allies bound together by circumstances neither could have foreseen. Behind them, the vampire lord's laughter echoed through the night, unaware that his greatest mistake was about to become Marcus Blackwood's most precious discovery. The abandoned monastery Marcus called home sat perched on a cliff overlooking the valley below. Ancient stone walls bore the scars of countless supernatural encounters, while silver-lined wards hummed with protective energy. As dawn approached, Marcus guided Serafina through the reinforced doors, noting how she didn't flinch at the blessed threshold like other vampires would. "You're not what I expected," Marcus admitted, settling her onto the worn leather couch near the fireplace. The flames cast dancing shadows across her pale features, highlighting the delicate bone structure that spoke of nobility despite her father's rejection. Serafina wrapped the offered blanket around her shoulders, studying her unlikely savior with those mesmerizing blue eyes. "What did you expect? A mindless monster thirsting for blood?" "Something like that," Marcus acknowledged, moving to prepare tea with practiced efficiency. "Your father's reputation precedes him. I assumed his heir would share his appetites." A bitter laugh escaped Serafina's lips. "I've disappointed him in every conceivable way. I can't transform into mist. I have no supernatural strength, and blood tastes like ash in my mouth. According to vampire standards, I'm completely defective." Marcus returned with the steaming cup, their fingers brushing as she accepted it. Again, that spark of connection passed between them, and he watched color bloom in her cheeks. "When did this start? The weakness?" "I mean, the day I was born," Serafina replied, though something flickered in her eyes that suggested there was more to the story. "Father tried everything, ancient rituals, forced feedings, even binding me to other vampires. Nothing worked. I remained what he called disappointingly human." Before Marcus could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the monastery. He tensed, hand moving instinctively to his weapon as he recognized the magical signature at his door. "Cassandra," he called out, "you're early." The witch who entered was a study in controlled chaos. Wild auburn hair barely contained by leather ties, emerald eyes that missed nothing, and enough protective charms to outfit a small army. Cassandra's gaze immediately fixed on Serafina with professional interest. Well, Cassandra murmured, approaching with the careful steps of someone accustomed to dangerous supernatural entities. "This is unexpected. Marcus Blackwood harboring a vampire?" "It's complicated," Marcus began, but Cassandra had already pulled out a small crystal that began glowing with increasing intensity as she neared Serafina. "Oh my," the witch breathed, her eyes widening as the crystal's light shifted from white to deep crimson. "Marcus, do you have any idea what you've brought into your home?" Serafina shrank back against the couch, fear evident in her expression. "Please, I'm not dangerous. I can't even feed properly." Cassandra's expression softened slightly, though her grip on the crystal remained firm. "You're not dangerous because you can't access your power, child. These readings," she turned to Marcus with something approaching awe. "She's been bound by blood magic of the highest order, chains woven into her very essence, suppressing abilities that would make ancient vampires weep with envy." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Her father did this to her. Had to be. Cassandra confirmed, beginning to circle Serafina, while studying the crystal's fluctuations. "This kind of binding requires the blood of the one who sired her. He's kept her weak deliberately, probably from birth." Serafina's cup trembled in her hands as memories began surfacing, painful rituals, disguised as attempts to help, her father's frustration when she failed to improve, the gradual realization that he preferred her powerless. Why would he do that to his own child? "Fear," Cassandra said simply. "Whatever you're capable of when unbound." It scared him enough to cripple his own heir rather than risk you discovering your true nature. Marcus moved to sit beside Serafina, offering comfort. Through proximity, the moment he settled next to her, Cassandra's crystal blazed with light so intense she nearly dropped it. "Fascinating," the witch murmured. "Your connection is affecting the bindings. Marcus, when you touch her, some of the suppression lifts." To demonstrate, Marcus took Serafina's free hand in his. Immediately, her pale skin began to glow with inner light, and the dark veins that had marked her weakness faded to silver tracery that looked almost decorative. She gasped, her back arching as sensation flooded through her. "I can feel it," she whispered, wonder replacing fear in her voice. "For the first time in centuries, I can feel my own power trying to surface." The effect was intoxicating for both of them. Marcus felt her strength flowing through their connection, while Serafina experienced hints of the abilities that had been stolen from her. But when he released her hand, the sensations faded, leaving her gasping with loss. "The bonds are too strong for casual contact to break," Cassandra observed clinically. "But sustained physical connection with someone she trusts could gradually weaken them. The question is whether you're prepared for what that might unleash." Before anyone could answer, the monastery's wards screamed a warning. Multiple supernatural signatures were approaching fast, their aggressive intent unmistakable. Marcus was moving before conscious thought engaged, pulling Serafina behind the couch as windows exploded inward. Victor Thornfield landed in the main room with predatory grace, his silver blessed crossbow already trained on Serafina. The rival hunter's scarred face bore its usual expression of grim satisfaction. As he took in the scene, Marcus Blackwood protecting a vampire, Victor said with disgust, "I always suspected you'd lost your edge, but this proves it. Stand aside and let me finish what should have been done centuries ago. She's under my protection." Marcus replied, his own weapons appearing in his hands with practiced speed. "Leave now, Victor, or this gets messy." Victor's laugh was harsh as gravel. "Protection. She's a vampire, Marcus. It doesn't matter if she's weak or strong. Her kind deserves death. I'm doing you a favor by removing the temptation." The standoff stretched taut as both hunters evaluated each other. Cassandra began weaving protective spells while Serafina pressed closer to Marcus, her hand finding his arm. The contact sent power surging between them, and for a moment, Victor's confident expression wavered. "What the hell?" Victor muttered, his crossbow tracking the energy signatures he could suddenly sense radiating from their joined forms. "You're about to find out why Lord Blackthorn was so eager to get rid of her," Marcus said, his voice carrying new confidence as Serafina's power continued to flow through their connection. The confrontation was about to begin in earnest, but Marcus found himself looking forward to it. For the first time since taking Serafina under his protection, he was beginning to understand exactly what kind of gift the vampire lord had unknowingly given him. The blood moon hung like a crimson eye in the star-drunk sky, its malevolent light streaming through the monastery's ancient windows. Serafina paced the main hall with restless energy, her form seeming to shimmer and shift in the lunar glow. Marcus watched her with growing concern, noting how her movements had become more fluid, more predatory since the confrontation with Victor 3 days prior. "The moon is calling to me," Serafina murmured, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in his bones. "I can feel something awakening, fighting against the chains my father placed upon me." Marcus moved closer, drawn by an instinct he didn't fully understand. The moment his hand touched her shoulder, silver fire raced beneath her skin, and her eyes blazed with inner light. The connection between them had grown stronger each day, and tonight it felt electric with possibility. "Tell me about the dreams," he said softly, having noticed how she'd begun talking in her sleep, speaking in languages that predated human civilization. Serafina leaned into his touch, her breath catching as waves of sensation coursed through her. "I see myself as I was meant to be, not weak, not broken, but powerful beyond imagining. I see armies of the night bowing before me, other vampires trembling at my presence, and I see you beside me, not as my protector but as my equal." The sound of approaching vehicles cut through the night's stillness. Marcus tensed, recognizing the particular rhythm of motorcycles designed for supernatural hunting. Through the monastery's reinforced windows, he could see torches and blessed silver gleaming in the moonlight. "They've found us," he said, grimly, moving to check his weapons. Victor wasn't working alone. Raven Shadowmere burst through the side entrance, her black leathers still smoking from whatever ward she'd passed through. The former hunter-turned-informant had been Marcus's ally for years, and her appearance meant serious trouble. 20 hunters minimum, she reported breathlessly, her silver hair catching the moonlight. "Victor's called in favors from across 3 territories. They're convinced you're harboring something that could tip the balance between species." Serafina laughed, the sound carrying an edge that made both hunters look at her sharply. "They're right to fear me, under this moon, with these bonds weakening. I can feel what I really am," as if to emphasize her words. The silver tracery beneath her skin began to pulse with increasing intensity. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees, and frost began forming on the windows despite the late summer night. "Serafina," Marcus said urgently, moving to take her hands. The moment their skin made contact, the chaotic energy stabilized, forming patterns of power that seemed to dance between them. "Focus on me. Let me anchor you. The blood moon amplifies vampire abilities." Raven observed with academic fascination even as she readied her weapons. If she's been suppressed this long, the sudden release could be overwhelming. Outside, the hunters began their approach, their chanted prayers creating a low harmonic that made the monastery's walls vibrate. Marcus could smell the blessed silver of their weapons, the holy water they'd sprinkled around the perimeter. "The garlic and wolfsbane meant to weaken supernatural entities. They think I'm like other vampires," Serafina said, her voice gaining confidence as Marcus's presence continued to stabilize her emerging power. "They're about to learn how wrong they are." The first wave of hunters breached the main doors with a thunderclap of splintering wood and shattered wards. Victor led the charge, his blessed crossbow loaded with silver-tipped bolts that gleamed with holy fire. Behind him came a dozen of the most experienced vampire hunters in the region, their faces set with grim determination. "Last chance, Marcus," Victor called out, his scarred features twisted with fanatic zeal. "Step away from the creature and we'll make this quick." Marcus's response was to pull Serafina closer, their connection sending visible waves of power rippling through the air. "She's not a creature, Victor. She's the future you're too narrow-minded to see." The battle erupted with supernatural fury. Blessed bolts sizzled through the air while Marcus returned fire with weapons that had been handed down through generations of his family. But it was Serafina who turned the tide of combat in ways that defied expectation. Instead of displaying traditional vampire abilities, she moved through the attacking hunters like liquid shadow. Silver weapons passed through her harmlessly when she chose to become incorporeal, while blessed ammunition seemed to strengthen rather than weaken her. Most shocking of all, the holy symbols and prayers that should have repelled her instead began to resonate with her power, Impossible, Victor breathed, his crossbow falling from nerveless fingers as Serafina materialized directly in front of him. You're not just vampire. What are you? Serafina's smile revealed fangs that seemed to be carved from starlight itself. I'm what happens when vampire royalty is conceived under a blood moon, and blessed by forces older than your small-minded religion. My father bound me because he knew I would surpass him in every way. The remaining hunters found themselves facing an entity that defied their training. Serafina moved with Marcus as if they'd been fighting together for centuries, their shared power creating attacks and defenses that neither could have managed alone. Holy water evaporated before touching her skin, while blessed silver began to tarnish and crack in her presence. Raven watched the display with growing awe, her analytical, mind-cataloging abilities she'd never encountered in decades of supernatural research. She's not just powerful, she murmured to herself. She's rewriting the rules of what vampires can be. As the last hunter fell or fled, Serafina turned to Marcus with eyes that blazed like captured stars. The blood moon's influence had awakened, something in her that went beyond simple vampire abilities. She was becoming something new. Something that bridged the gap between the mortal and immortal worlds. Thank you, she whispered, pressing herself against him as the power continued to flow between them. For seeing what I could become instead of what I was told I was. Marcus held her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. This is just the beginning, isn't it? Serafina's laugh was like silver bells touched with darkness. Oh yes, my father thought he was discarding useless trash. But he's given you the key to reshaping both our worlds. As dawn approached and the blood moon began to fade, Marcus realized that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. But with Serafina's true nature beginning to emerge and their bond growing stronger by the hour, he found himself eager to face whatever destiny had in store for them. The ancient vampire council chamber had not seen such tension in 5 centuries. Carved from black marble and lined with the skulls of fallen enemies, the circular hall thrummed with supernatural power as the most powerful vampires in existence gathered to witness something unprecedented. At the chamber's heart, Serafina stood with Marcus at her side, her transformation complete after weeks of gradual awakening. Gone was the fragile, powerless heir who had been cast aside as worthless. In her place stood a being of terrible beauty, her pale skin luminescent with inner fire, her midnight hair flowing as if moved by unfelt winds. Most remarkable were her eyes, no longer simply blue. They now held depths that seemed to contain galaxies, ancient wisdom, and power that made even elder vampires step back. In unconscious submission, Lord Blackthorn sat upon his obsidian throne, his crimson eyes narrow with barely contained rage as he observed his transformed daughter. Beside him, other members of the vampire nobility whispered among themselves, their voices creating a susurrus of fear and fascination. Impossible, muttered Damien Ashworth, a vampire whose age predated written history. No daywalker has existed. For over a millennium, the bloodline was thought extinct. Eleanor Ravencrest, ancient beyond measure, leaned forward with predatory interest. Not extinct, merely hidden. The old bloodlines spoke of children born under crimson moons who could walk in sunlight and command powers that transcended traditional vampire limitations. Marcus remained close to Serafina, their connection now so complete that he could feel her emotions as if they were his own. The past weeks had revealed abilities that defied explanation. She could indeed walk in sunlight, growing stronger rather than weaker under its rays. Holy symbols held no power over her. Blessed weapons shattered at her touch, and her mere presence could influence the minds of both vampires and humans. You bound me, Serafina said, her voice carrying across the chamber with supernatural clarity. For 3 centuries, you kept me weak and powerless because you knew what I would become. Lord Blackthorn's laugh was harsh, but Marcus detected the fear underlying his bravado. You were an abomination from birth. Vampire children should not survive sunlight. They should not resist our most sacred rituals. I did what was necessary to prevent you from becoming a threat to our natural order. Natural order. Serafina's power flared, and several of the lesser vampires actually cowered. You mean the order where you rule through fear and cruelty, where anyone different is destroyed rather than celebrated. The great doors of the chamber burst open with thunderous force. Lucian Darkbane, Lord Blackthorn's most trusted enforcer, strode into the hall leading a contingent of vampire warriors. His pale eyes fixed on Serafina with undisguised hunger. "Father," Lucian said, though his gaze never left Serafina, "allow me to reclaim your wayward daughter. Such power should serve the ancient bloodlines, not waste itself on mortal affections." Marcus stepped forward, his hand moving to weapons that had been blessed not just with silver, but with something far older and more potent. During their time together, Serafina's awakening abilities had begun affecting his equipment, imbuing his weapons with power that could actually harm elder vampires. "She chooses her own path," Marcus declared, his voice ringing with absolute conviction. "I've seen what you call order. It's nothing but tyranny dressed in tradition." The confrontation erupted without warning. Lucian moved with speed that should have been impossible to track. But Marcus was no longer entirely human. Serafina's power flowed through their bond, enhancing his reflexes and strength to supernatural levels. His blade, glowing with combined moonfire and starlight, met Lucian's claws in a shower of sparks. Around them, the chamber descended into chaos as ancient alliances shattered. Some vampires moved to support Lord Blackthorn's claim over his daughter, while others sensed the changing winds and began to position themselves near Serafina. The very air crackled with conflicting magics as powers that had slumbered for centuries awakened. But it was Serafina herself who ended the battle in a way that left even the eldest vampires speechless. As Marcus fought desperately against Lucian's inhuman strength, she simply expanded. Her consciousness seemed to fill the entire chamber, touching every mind present with irresistible force. "Enough," she said, and reality bent around the word. Every vampire in the chamber, from the youngest fledgling to thousand-year-old elders, found themselves compelled to stillness. Even Lucian froze mid-strike, his claws inches from Marcus's throat. Only Lord Blackthorn, protected by his blood connection to Serafina, retained the ability to move. "This is what you feared," Serafina continued, her form now radiating light. "That cast no shadows, not just power, but the ability to unite rather than divide, to inspire loyalty through love rather than terror." Marcus felt her consciousness brush against his, sharing the full scope of what she had become. She wasn't just a daywalker or a powerful vampire, she was evolution itself, the next step in supernatural development, a being who could bridge the gap between species, who could walk equally in the worlds of light and shadow. "You were right to bind me as a child," Serafina acknowledged, turning to face her father directly. "If I had developed these abilities naturally, I might have destroyed everything in my inexperience. But Marcus taught me control, showed me how power should be used to protect rather than dominate." Lord Blackthorn's composure finally cracked. "You would overthrow everything our kind has built. Centuries of careful balance between the supernatural and mortal worlds. I would improve it." Serafina replied simply, "No more hiding in shadows, feeding on fear. No more discarding those who don't fit narrow definitions of perfection. A new age where strength comes from unity, not isolation." She released her hold on the assembled vampires, but instead of resuming their attack, most found themselves kneeling. The display of power had been absolute, but more importantly, they had felt the emotions behind it, not conquest or domination, but a genuine desire to heal the wounds that centuries of supernatural warfare had created. Eleanor Ravencrest was the first to speak. "You offer a vision that many of us have dreamed of but never dared attempt. What would you have of us, young queen?" The title sent ripples through the chamber. By acknowledging Serafina as queen, Eleanor had effectively declared Lord Blackthorn's reign ended. Other elders began to murmur agreement, recognizing both the power and the wisdom they had witnessed. "I would have you choose," Serafina said, her voice gentle now but no less commanding. "Stand with me in building something new, or cling to the old ways and find yourselves irrelevant to the future." Marcus moved to stand beside her, marveling at how completely she had transformed not just herself, but the entire political landscape of the supernatural world. The frightened, powerless woman he had protected was gone, replaced by a leader who commanded respect through inspiration rather than fear. As dawn approached, and the chamber slowly emptied. Those vampires who chose to follow their new queen already, beginning to plan for a very different future. Marcus found himself alone with Serafina in the ancient hall. No regrets. He asked, taking her hand and feeling the familiar surge of shared power. Serafina's smile was radiant as starlight. How could I regret finding everything I never knew I wanted? Power, purpose, and someone who saw my potential when I couldn't see it myself. The sun rose through the chamber's eastern windows, its light falling on a vampire who welcomed rather than feared its touch. Together, they stood ready to reshape both their worlds. 6 months had passed since Serafina claimed her throne, and the supernatural world barely resembled what it had been. The ancient vampire citadel had been transformed from a monument to darkness, into something unprecedented, a palace where sunlight streamed through crystal windows, where humans walked freely among vampires, and where the old ways of fear and domination had given way to cooperation and mutual respect. Marcus stood on the great balcony overlooking the courtyard below, watching as vampire younglings played alongside human children under the afternoon sun. The sight would have been impossible just a year ago, but Serafina's influence had changed everything. Her ability to walk in daylight had proven infectious in ways no one anticipated. Vampires who spent time near her gradually developed similar resistances, their supernatural nature evolving rather than being constrained by ancient limitations. The delegation from the Northern Covens has arrived, Morgana Winterborn announced as she joined him on the balcony. The ancient vampire queen had been among the first to pledge allegiance to Serafina, recognizing that the young daywalker represented hope for their species' survival in a changing world. Marcus nodded, straightening his formal attire. As Serafina's consort, he had found himself thrust into a role he'd never imagined, not just hunter-turned-protector, but diplomat and advocate for a new kind of supernatural society. Are they still demanding proof of her legitimacy? Some are, Morgana admitted, her silver hair catching the sunlight without causing her any discomfort. Like many of the vampires in Serafina's inner circle, proximity to their queen had begun awakening abilities they'd never possessed. But Lord Blackthorn's arrival may complicate matters. Marcus's expression darkened. Serafina's father had spent the past months gathering supporters from the most traditional vampire houses, those who viewed her transformation of their society as an abomination that needed to be corrected. His presence here could only mean a final confrontation was at hand. The throne room had been redesigned to reflect Serafina's dual nature. Shadows and light danced together across walls that displayed both the night sky and aurora-like phenomena. When Marcus entered, he found his queen holding court with representatives from dozens of supernatural factions, her presence harmonizing their naturally conflicting energies. Serafina herself had continued to evolve, her beauty now so transcendent. It was difficult to look directly at her for extended periods. Starlight seemed to flow beneath her pale skin, while her midnight hair moved as if touched by solar winds. She wore a gown that shifted between deep shadow and brilliant luminescence, a perfect metaphor for what she had become. "My love," she said, extending her hand as he approached the throne. The moment their fingers touched, Marcus felt the familiar surge of shared power. But now it carried harmonics of everything she had become, day and night, mortal and immortal, ancient wisdom and eternal hope. "The Northern Covens wish to test your authority," Adrian Silvermoon reported. The reformed vampire had become one of Serafina's most trusted advisors. His own transformation from traditional bloodsucker to something approaching a guardian angel, serving as inspiration for others seeking change. "And my father?" Serafina asked, though Marcus could feel through their bond that she already knew the answer. "Lord Blackthorn has called for a formal challenge," Adrian confirmed grimly. "He claims right of reclamation, asserting that your powers are unnatural and therefore invalid according to ancient law." Serafina's laugh was like silver chimes touched with starfire. How perfectly traditional of him. "Very well, let him come. It's time to settle this properly." The great hall had been cleared for the confrontation, its vast space filled with representatives from every major supernatural faction: vampires, werewolves, witches, and even a delegation of angels watched as Lord Blackthorn entered with theatrical grandeur. He had gathered the old guard around him, ancient vampires who remembered when their kind ruled through terror and considered human contact beneath their dignity. "My wayward daughter," Lord Blackthorn announced, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "You have perverted everything our kind represents. You consort with mortals. You welcome sunlight that should destroy you, and you preach cooperation with beings who should serve as cattle. I invoke the right of dominion to reclaim what was stolen from our people." Marcus tensed, ready to intervene, but Serafina's gentle touch on his arm stayed him. Through their bond, he felt her absolute confidence and something else, anticipation, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "I accept your challenge, Father," Serafina said, rising from her throne with fluid grace. "But let us make the terms clear. This is not about ancient rites or traditional power. This is about the future of all supernatural beings, and whether we will evolve or remain trapped in the past." The battle that followed defied every expectation. Lord Blackthorn unleashed power that had been accumulating for millennia. Shadows that devoured light, cold that could freeze souls, and psychic assaults that had broken the minds of elder vampires. But Serafina met each attack with abilities that transcended traditional vampire limitations. Where her father brought darkness, she answered with light that did not blind but illuminated. His cold was met with warmth that healed rather than burned. His mental attacks shattered against a consciousness that had expanded beyond individual existence to encompass something approaching universal awareness. But the true shock came when Serafina revealed the full extent of what she had become. As Lord Blackthorn's assault intensified, she simply opened herself to everything she was, and the entire hall was flooded with presence that was simultaneously vampire and angel, darkness and light, eternal night and everlasting day. "This is what you tried to prevent," she said, her voice now carrying harmonics that resonated in dimensions beyond the physical. "Not just a powerful vampire, but a bridge between all supernatural realms, a being who can unite what has always been divided." Lord Blackthorn's composure cracked as he finally understood what his daughter had become. Impossible. The ancient bloodlines, the sacred separations, were always meant to evolve. Serafina completed gently. "You bound me not because I was weak, but because you sensed I represented change you couldn't control. But some changes are inevitable, Father. I am what our kind becomes when love replaces fear as the driving force." The defeat was absolute, but not vindictive. Rather than destroying her father, Serafina offered him the same choice she had given all the old guard: evolve or become irrelevant. Some, including Lord Blackthorn himself, chose exile rather than adaptation. Others, seeing the genuine peace and prosperity that Serafina's rule had brought, knelt and pledged their allegiance to the new age. As the hall slowly emptied, delegates, already planning how to implement similar changes in their own territories, Marcus found himself alone with Serafina in the vast space. The formal confrontation was over, but he sensed something more personal approaching. "There's one more transformation I'd like to make," Serafina said, turning to face him with an expression that mixed love, anticipation, and just a hint of nervousness. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, she knelt before him, her starlight gown pooling around her like captured moonbeams. From somewhere within its folds, she produced a ring that seemed to be carved from crystallized starlight itself. "Marcus Blackwood," she said, her voice now carrying only the warmth of the woman he'd fallen in love with. "You saw potential where others saw only burden. You offered protection when I needed shelter and partnership when I found strength. Will you complete this transformation by becoming not just my consort, but my husband?" The proposal caught him completely off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. They had already bound themselves together in ways that transcended traditional marriage, their souls intertwined through shared power and mutual devotion. But the formal recognition meant everything. "Yes," he said, helping her rise and accepting the ring that fit his finger, as if it had been crafted specifically for him. "Though I should warn you, marrying a former vampire hunter might cause some political complications." Serafina's laugh filled the hall with music that seemed to make the very air sparkle. "My love, we've already revolutionized the supernatural world, united ancient enemies, and proven that evolution is possible even for immortal beings. I think we can handle a few political complications. Their kiss was witnessed by moonlight and starlight streaming through the crystal windows, a perfect metaphor for what they had built together, a love that bridged impossible differences, and a partnership that had literally reshaped reality. 1 year later, their wedding became the template for a new kind of supernatural society. Vampires and humans celebrated together under both sun and stars. Ancient enemies shared toasts to the couple's happiness, and children who would grow up in a world where difference was celebrated rather than feared. Played in gardens where flowers bloomed in eternal twilight, Marcus stood with his bride on the balcony of their transformed palace, watching the celebration below while marveling at the journey that had brought them here. From a cruel joke to a cosmic love story, from hunter and hunted to partners in reshaping the world itself. Any regrets? Serafina asked, echoing his question from months earlier.